What if I told you that there is an 800-year-old medieval death chant that you will have heard many times in some of the most popular pieces and film music that there is? Well, it's true, but in order to hear it, first I need to train your ears to hear it. So let's get into it. So the death chant itself is a 13th century Gregorian chant called Dies Irae, which means Day of Wrath. And it was originally a Catholic poem about Judgment Day and the end of the world. And the concept of the poem and the chant is that at the end of the world, we hit our final judgment where we're put before God, and he's going to judge whether we're allowed to open the pearly gates and go to heaven, or we're going to hell instead. And in the context of a funeral, this chant was actually sung as a form of prayer in hopes that this person would survive judgment. So in the 1500s, this was compulsory at Catholic funerals until relatively recently, when it was removed for being too dark. However, as you can probably imagine, because it was in funerals, it was something that a lot of people knew. And the opening 4 notes of the chant have made it into lots and lots of pieces as a kind of representation of death. And those 4 notes sound like this. So here is the Gregorian chant itself, and the first 4 notes are the notes that I just played, but they keep reappearing throughout the chant. Dies irae, dies illa. Quantus tremores futurus, per sepulcra region, cum resurget creatura. So now you know what the sound of death actually is. Let's follow the trail of how it's made it into some of the most famous films that there are. Now, already, because this tune was used in funerals all of the time, people had an association of that tune with death. However, its first proper usage in a piece of music to represent death was by Berlioz in 1830. He uses it in his Symphonie Fantastique, and I'm just going to read you what the Symphonie Fantastique is about. Symphonie Fantastique is the hallucination of a young artist who's hopelessly obsessed with a woman. She's represented by a recurring melody, the idée fixe, that haunts every movement. He takes opium, and the symphony is his dream. By the 4th movement, he's dreamt he murdered her and been marched to the guillotine and executed. So the 5th movement, which is where the Dies Irae is used, happens after his own death. So in the 5th movement, he's dreaming that he's at his own funeral, but it's a grotesque witch's sabbath, a swarm of monsters, ghouls, and sorcerers gathered to gloat over him. And the theme that represents the woman in the dream is twisted into a vulgar kind of alternative version. And this is how the Dies Irae is used in the 5th movement. And that is pretty crazy, as the first usage of this that is outside funerals. People actually consider this to be blasphemous. Oh. And there was a lot of outrage that it was used like this. However, that did make the piece famous, and it also set up this theme as something to be used as a representation of death. Particularly because in the audience at the time, there was another composer. And that composer, who was Franz Liszt, was amazed by what Berlioz had done with it and decided to use it himself. And in 1849, he wrote a piece called Totentanz, which is terrible pronunciation, but I'm going with it. And that means Dance of Death. Now, in Liszt's piece, you kind of have the same idea almost on top of each other twice. You've got the piano part kind of doing this, and then the brass over the top. So here, once again, we have this same kind of idea. being used in order to represent death in a piece of music. Now, this theme has come back so many times in pieces after this. However, as time has gone on, it's become much less explicit. It's become much less people just using it outright as the melody, and more woven into the piece of music as a kind of underlying suggestion of death. And in 1874, Saint-Saëns wrote Le Danse Macabre, which uses this theme in a much more subtle way. Once again, because this piece is called Le Danse Macabre, and that means the death dance, or dance of death, again, because clearly people like writing pieces about dancing with death, the same notes are used in a much more light and dancey way as a kind of hint and suggestion of that idea of death. So you can hear it here in the woodwind part. And this is still the same notes, but it has a much more kind of jokey, playing with death kind of idea to it. When I was in the depths of learning the piano, there are lots of tools that I wish I'd had. And that is exactly why I built an app called The Practice Room. The Practice Room is an all-in-one place where you can log your practice sessions, get statistics and insights about your playing. There are resources like theory articles, an entire pieces library with backgrounds for all the pieces, what you should be able to do before you play them, what you'll get from learning them. There are practice tools that will help you fix your playing, that will help you recognize chords and pieces of music, even a metronome. And I also do deep dive live practice clinics every 2 weeks on a very specific topic about learning the piano. So if that sounds of interest to you, then check it out with the link in the description. Okay, back to the video. So all of the composers that have used this so far have used it in a piece to really represent death. However, the next composer used this in many different pieces, and that composer is Rachmaninoff. But once again, he uses it as a suggestion of death, as a motif to represent that idea, without explicitly telling you that this is that same Gregorian chant. And one of the pieces that he used it in is in his Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini, in his 7th variation. And you can hear the same shape written into the piano chords at the top. So now we are really getting a suggestion of it. We're getting these chords. And these are still following that same, which is that exact same suggestion of death. He then used it again in his piece Isle of the Dead in 1909. Now this one is interesting because it's used kind of for two things. Firstly, it represents death because it is that theme, even if at the beginning here only very lightly suggested. But it's also supposed to represent a painting of a boat heading towards the island of the dead. And you get this sense of oars rowing a boat while this same theme is being kind of used. And if this theme could not represent death anymore, Rachmaninoff actually used it in his very final piece. So he really did use it in a lot of works. Now, interestingly, so far, from the very beginning, this theme has got more and more hidden within the context of the music that's happening. In Berlioz's example, it was very explicit and a direct representation of the funeral march that everyone had heard. But as time has gone on, composers have hidden it under the music to make the music feel like death without the listener really acknowledging it. And now, hopefully, that you can hear this theme, when I show you how it's used now, sometimes explicitly and sometimes more hidden, you'll see how many film composers have hidden it in some of the most famous movies that there are. And the first, and probably the most explicit example in a film, is in The Shining, in the very opening scene. And this just shows that Stanley Kubrick wanted this to sound like death from the very start of the film. And he does that by very cleverly using an 800-year-old Gregorian chant that's been littered throughout music. But The Shining is a horror film. What about in films that aren't horror films, like Home Alone, for example? Home Alone is personally one of my favourite Christmas movies, and this theme is used to represent the old man, Marley, who scares Kevin in the film. So see if you can subtly hear it being used as the last 4 notes in this scene.
That's where he keeps his victims. The salt turns the bodies into mummies. Wow.
Yeah! Look out!
Did you hear it? Now, although this melody still signifies death, in modern movies, it's used much more broadly than it was ever originally used in pieces of music much earlier on. It can represent loss or something dark happening in movies, and it's used all of the time. Here are just a few examples of it. So, Star Wars, for example. Did you hear it there? If not, maybe The Lion King? In that case. Or, in the second example in Lion King, you can hear it buried in the background in the strings.
Ah, so you haven't told them your little secret. Well, Simba, now's your chance to tell them. Tell them who is responsible for Mufasa's death.
It also becomes one of the themes in Lord of the Rings. It's used in Jurassic Park much quicker and to create a kind of nervous energy.
Okay, following the piping.
Timmy, I bet I could climb over the top and be on the other side before you could even get to the top. What would you give me? Respect?
Come on, guys, it's not a race.
It's used in Groundhog Day. And there are countless other examples where this same Gregorian chant is used to tell you how to feel. And music does that very well. It creates associations, and then we feel those associations when they appear in music over and over again. Another one of those associations is the most evil sound in music. And if you want to know how the most evil sound in music became the sound of love in music, then head on through, and I will see you there.